Um, so tonight what we're going to be doing is we are going to be speaking about how we came to be coaches, why we do the work that we do, and we will each tell you our story. How are you, Andrew?
Well, I'm doing good, Anita. Yourself?
Yep, all good, all good. Yeah, interested to hear. I don't know whether I'm going to hear anything different from yours, but yeah. Do you want to kick us off as to what made you want to become a coach?
Yeah, cool. I don't even know what I'm going to say. It's been 6 years, so hopefully my memory serves me correct. Uh, so for those that don't know anything about me, hi, I'm Andrew, and 6 years ago I finished up a corporate career in financial technology. And so for the best part of 20 odd years, a little bit shorter than that, I'd been working in the finance, investment bank, technology, accounting sort of space, doing consulting work, then doing transformation and project work, and then, ultimately being an executive of a $120 million company a few years ago. And, essentially towards the end of my corporate career, and, we've discussed this many times before, Anita, but for the benefit of the audience, I was predominantly driven by curiosity, intellectual problem solving, self image, bit of status, a bit of money, having material goods, enjoying travel, enjoying different experiences, novelty, all of these sort of things, which I got in spades for the first 37 years of my life. And then, towards the end, I guess a pattern in myself showed itself at its peak. And I'd been able to sort of get by up until then, running this pattern and not really being aware of it. But essentially, I burn out, in the corporate job. And so, yeah, I'd got a lot of fulfillment, success, and joy from the corporate world. But towards the end of the career, it became really political, became quite intense. There was a lot of games being played that I didn't particularly enjoy. Um, became far more about the optics than actually doing, something worthwhile. And so I was feeling a little bit jaded in the corporate career. And, I guess looking back on it now, it was really a loss of meaning. And that was making way for the new type of meaning to come through. And so I remember, I won't go through all the gory details of it, but I was so knackered. I was flying back and forth from the to and from the UK from here in Melbourne every couple of weeks. Had a really demanding client and had 500 employees all over the world, in India and China, etc. So I was kind of working 20-hour days, taking calls at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And, part of it, Joe, my wife, kind of, put me on the spot one day and she said, what are you actually married to here? Who are you actually married to? Is it the job or me? And, I'd carried a fair bit of guilt and shame as well from being, really away from Ollie for the first 4 years of his life. And so that was a disappointment and a regret for me doing the corporate thing. So anyway, it all sort of culminated and we had a buyout of the company and, I had an opportunity to leave and, I was a little bit hesitant because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So that's the whole backstory. And then anyway, I sort of walked out with not a plan in the world. Sort of for those of you that know your Enneagrams, typical type 7. It's not my lead position, but it's pretty strong. And I started traveling. So I had 6 or 7 weeks over in Canada, in Massachusetts, in New York, in California, and met a few incredible people. At that point in time, I was really interested in getting my health back on track. So I learned a lot about kinesiology, functional medicine, biomechanics, all of these kind of things. And I was very much into biohacking at the time. And that had been around for 2 or 3 years prior. But I thought, I was pretty passionate about that and my health was not so great. So that was the mission. That was the temporary mission, if you like. And, I met a fella in the west coast of the States called Paul Check. Maybe some of your audience might be more acquainted with Paul and perhaps even mine. But Paul was amazing. He sort of covered everything from psychology to biology to, structural biomechanics and all sorts of different things. And I learned a lot from Paul, and really started to get a little bit more into spirituality and feelings, emotions, trauma, the backstory of everyone's humanity, I guess. And that was the beginning of the new chapter for me. And I just mentioned that in a little bit of detail. Just tell me to shut up whenever you.
No, go.
Sorry, I realise I'm taking a fair bit of oxygen here. But I'll keep it short. I mean, with Paul, I did some training with Paul. Paul had coached some really amazing people. And I did some training with Paul, and then I came back to Australia and I did some more training in his system. And, as part of that training, I remember actually the exercise that was the difference that made the difference, because I was kind of hedging my bets. I thought, well, maybe I'll continue just as a consultant in the corporate world, or maybe I'll do my own business. I'm not really sure yet. So I was still hedging my bets by training further in what I already knew. And then I was also opening up a new thing with Paul and his work. And, a lady here in Australia by the name of Jo Rushton, she took the second level of Paul's training. We did an exercise on about day 3 of that training where we were actually doing archetype work. So Jungian archetype work as part of that training. And, through that process of getting back in touch with, the archetypes that were most resonant for me, thinking back to when I was a child, I always liked helping people. And I'd lost touch with that. Actually, it was more about things and status and, that kind of world rather than helping people. And that was the start of the second evolution of meaning making for me, really. So it was getting back to caring for myself and others, working on my emotional fitness, emotional intelligence, that sort of stuff. And during that archetype work, I remember, coaching was something that ticked all the boxes of the inner archetypes. So there's more primal symbols, I guess, the intuitive side of me that I hadn't really worked with for pretty much since I was a child. And I mean, I didn't work with my intuition as a child. It just happens. But so, that led me to explore coaching. And that's how it started. And I'll stop there and
That's good.
take a breath.
That's good to hear it. So we've probably got quite different stories. So for me, I was very interested in humans and people from quite a young age, and that probably is the similarity. But we just, as you say, we took different routes in it, and we got conditioned in different ways. And my conditioning, I guess, led to me wanting to really find out more about humans from then. And I think for me, I would say that would have been on behalf of watching adults as I was growing up and seeing that there was this thing that people didn't seem happy. I was watching people, adults being angry, being depressed, sometimes being happy, but a lot of the time I wasn't seeing happiness. And it was like that quite early on, who knows at what stage that, but that quite early on was something in me that went, there's got to be more to life, whether I said it in that way. And I believe that that's the reason that I would go around and I would, question people. I wanted to know about people's lives. And even from quite a young age, I was at boarding school from 7 years old. And from an early age, I was there questioning, and people would ask me, why are you asking so many questions? I guess like people do ask kids. And I think when I remember back to that, it's like, and when I see people saying that to kids, it's like, there's more to it than them just being annoying children. I know for me that there was something genuinely, interested in being a better, happier human than what I was seeing. So that was what my question was on behalf of. Whether that's true for other kids, I can't say, but I definitely know within me that I remembered that, that was a priority. And so as I went through my teenage years, I was always, there'd always be a friend that we would be unpacking things with. We would be, dissecting ourselves. And within that, there was always this thing. I probably got to late teens, and then I had some issues with eating. I had an eating disorder at that stage, probably from actually the age of 13. And there was something in me. I remember sitting with my friends, or at least one or two friends, and they would say, "Oh, why don't you go and see a therapist?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I will one day." But it just felt okay to be doing this with friends. And there was so much unpicking of it that I learnt in theory quite a lot about myself through that unpacking of self. But then when I got to the age of 26, I was then really ready to go, right, I don't want my life to be dominated by this eating disorder. Like, food was kind of on my mind 24/7. It ruled my life. And so that's what took me into going to therapy. And it was interesting because I got into therapy, and in therapy, we barely spoke about food. We got straight to the root cause of food. What did food represent? Love. So it was this love-hate relationship. And then it went back to an exploration around, what food meant in the family. There was lots of, food that was used as love. That was the love language of us growing up. And whenever I used to go and see my therapist, I just wanted to be in her chair. I wanted to be doing her job. And by that stage, I was already working in real estate, and I had done my degree. And even at the time when I was picking my degree, there was this thing that wanted to do psychology, but I didn't have I didn't get the maths or whatever it was. But I also knew that I wasn't desperate to do psychology, because for me, I was like, if I needed the maths and the sciences, that's not my interest. My interest was in the people side. So the degree got done. And what happened at uni? There was a lot of people time. That was it. School as well, less academia and more about people and the friends that I've got from school and, university, even to this day, because I built such close relationships. And so then, so at 26, I had 8 years of going to see this lady every week, and just this real desire to be doing what she was doing. But there was never going to be a chance, as far as I could see, that was ever going to happen. I was never going to go back to university. It didn't seem back then in the UK that there was that you could be a therapist just by maybe doing even a diploma or anything like that. So that was that. And then I got into, so 8 years later, I was in a job for 11 years in real estate. And then there was this moment where a relationship broke down after many years. And then I quit my job. And after many sort of many travels for a year, going back and forth from England, not working really, I landed in Australia. And that for me was the absolute change point. As soon as I got there, that was 10 years ago, I was surrounded by coaches. And that was obviously my choosing. And it was interesting because I'd finished with my therapist. She had a bit of a cry as I left. But I knew that there was something more. I knew that there was something more. No, I didn't. I think when I left England back then, I was only going, I didn't know how long I was going to be away for. It was only planned to be a few months. But there was something that stopped I knew that I was, I was done with therapy. I'd done, I'd exhausted it. And I think because I was going somewhere more exciting, I didn't cry. A lot of people cried. Whereas when I was leaving Australia, that was much more emotional for me. Whereas I was going on to adventure. So I got to Australia, and as I said, I was surrounded by lots of coaches, and they had, studied courses. Some had obviously been to university, but most people, the art of the coaching they were doing wasn't learnt in university. It was learnt through courses. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time with coaches for probably a couple of years before I even started to train in it myself. And I think because I'd had such a wealth of knowledge of my own exploration, and obviously working in, with a therapist, and then, coming into, I was already quite ready when I was around all these coaches. I felt very confident around them. I didn't feel like I was some sort of inferior person. I was so confident that this was, because I was so well practiced at it for asking questions for all of my life. And then I started studying, and I just took course after course after course. And I think the most important thing for me within that was, it was like I'd finally found the thing that I actually really enjoyed to study, and it wasn't difficult, whereas study was difficult for me because I wasn't interested. and this just became this, this thing that I would go and do, and it wasn't even studying. It was watching. It
So
was
what
going on
interests
courses.
you about the people? Like, I love it. This is great. Like, if I was to ask you, what was the interest in people so early? You mentioned that you were wondering why people looked unhappy, which is
Mm,
a fair play. Like, I certainly wasn't looking for that stuff when I was 7.
mm, mm.
I was probably more self-absorbed in my own lack of height. But yeah, I'm curious. Like, what made you so interested in humans?
I think it was the quest to be a better human being than what I was seeing. And this is where I always wonder what I maybe came into this life with. I don't know. Was it just from my upbringing, or was there something more to it? But yeah, there was this thing of there's got to be more than what I'm seeing. And I think it was like, the word happy was, for quite a few years, maybe teenage years, I could remember it was like, how do I become more happy? And I was quite miserable because I was, not having a great relationship with food, seemingly. And then as time went on, it was like, it's not about happiness anymore. It was actually, in theory, about feeling better, and then, feeling peaceful, whatever it is. Happiness didn't, I learned that happiness was a state that wasn't necessarily a true state. And yeah, I think it was just seeing what I was seeing and going, there's got to be more. And I know that with me, when I called up with some friends recently who I hadn't seen for many years, they reminded me that they remember me saying that there's got to be more to life than this. And that was me in my 30s by then. And then going over to Australia, it was like, this is it. Like, this is, not only was I living Bondi Beach, beautiful, scenery everywhere. I was studying, I wasn't drinking anymore. I was barely went out socially in that respect. And I was just full on into my life, became my courses, and just watching YouTubes and just,
How many
learning
times
more and more.
did you do the courses? I was trying to count for myself. I've never asked you, but
Mm.
I kind of probably figured that you'd done some of those courses 4 or 5 times.
No, 20 times. Like, no, so
20
many times.
times.
Yeah. Every time there was a
Maybe I
course
need to go
on,
back to school and get me maths checked.
every time, and there was courses running very regularly then. They were like once a month. So every time there was a course, it's like I wouldn't be working, I would be like that my priority was this, it was becoming a coach. Um, and there was an aspect of it as well where I hadn't worked for, I don't know, 2-3 years really. So there was also the part that it was, I needed to earn money. But it wasn't even, there wasn't enough pressure on that to go out and need to build some big business. It was always, for me, it's always been about having enough. So did I have enough to pay my rent? Did I have enough to sit in a beautiful cafe in Bondi drinking, my chai tea, which I absolutely love, and talking to people and going on the courses at the weekends? And it was always like, work fits around that doesn't fit around work. And so the life just, had been constructed in that way. And then once I did start having clients, it was minimal numbers of hours a week. For me personally, too much talking. I like to have a lot of, time in between talking. And that's definitely I've definitely become quieter as the years have gone on. And yeah, so for me, for the last 10 years, there hasn't been, more than 10 hours of work a week. So it's to me, it's never been work anyway. It's a conversation with a person that I'm actually getting paid for, which I could be, talking to them on the street. And it became that there would be people that I sat and talked to on the street, and then there'll be people that were clients, and it was like one was paying and one wasn't, but it actually didn't matter. The qualities of the conversation was still, enriching, and it was like, yeah, this person's not going to leave here until they've got something from this, and they would, right? And the amount of times it was like, there's a reason I've met you. Being like, I'd become very accomplished from a young age at getting people to like me. I was at boarding school from a young age, so my security and my safety was in people. So I was a master at getting people to like me if I wanted them to, let's say. So yeah,
Didn't work on me, so you mustn't have wanted to.
that's what I mean. I became very, very, very skilled at it, and so that was, I'd say, in a roundup, that was,
So how
that
much
was
of it
what
do
took
you
me to
think,
it.
like, I'm curious, how much of it was, came from within yourself? How much do you think of it was born from this group that you had in boarding school where you used to sort of dissect yourselves from an early age? How much of it
Definitely
was?
me. I would seek people out that wanted to talk. I would, I'd have a lot of friends, but there'd be one or two at a time where we would just go into a corner, whether this was at school, whether this was at a nightclub, later on in life, and we would just sit and we would talk. So it was me. It was whatever it was within me, and I would bring people in. I'd find people that were obviously interested as well, but I would draw. I would find the people that were kind of interested, and then they'd be really interested in it as well. So definitely within me. Yeah, and obviously it would have been within them at some level as well, right? To whatever degree that was. And
Yeah,
many of
sure.
my friends, so growing up, they weren't in this work, but they were very into looking into themselves, maybe were in therapy themselves, a lot of them. And then as time has gone on, a lot of my friends that I'm directly, they're into this work. That's because we obviously want to be with the people that we want to talk about the same sort of stuff with. So, yeah. So yeah, that's the story. So I think for me, it was becoming a coach. For me, it was like this disbelief of I'm getting paid to just be me. Because when I used to work in corporate, I was a manager, so there was that people side, but there was also a lot of work to be done. And for me, the work got done over the people because there was a lot of anxiety running. So I would feel that I needed to make myself feel better by ploughing through the work. So although I loved, the staff that I worked with, and I think I was, I was pretty good with them as well, but it was definitely the priority was getting through the stuff. And that would always kind of come up. It was like, I don't enjoy my work, but I enjoy the people side. Yet I'm in the work because I know that's the survival piece in theory. That's what's going to keep me there is getting through the work, not being, good to the people. So I think by the time, I became a coach, it was like, I'm actually getting paid to do what I absolutely love. And I used to say to be me, to be able to, to do all the questioning and all the rest of it that I love doing, without needing to go to meetings that I didn't really enjoy or be hitting KPIs, trying to hit KPIs and all the rest of it, which was just there as a survival. So yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, cool. So what has being a coach taught you about yourself?
What has being a coach taught me about myself?
Yeah, because what I'm trying to get at here, I'm just curious as to, before we are coaches, we've got an image or a representation of what we think it's going to be like and, how we're going to be in it and with it. And then when we get into it, obviously we're learning as we're going too, like everyone. And so I'm curious to explore if there's anything you've learned about yourself through actually being one, like proper, if you like.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that I can't recall thinking it would be a certain way that it wasn't. I don't have
Right.
that recollection, probably because I was already doing it, I guess. I don't know. It wasn't like I suddenly came in and, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's so much I've learned about myself. But yeah, maybe. What would you say? Go to you first, and then I'll say if I
About
think.
you or for me?
No, for you. Yeah, for you.
Sorry, I'm in a jovial mood tonight. Yeah, I think for me it was just a whole different world. Yeah, I mean, because I guess there's elements as we're talking. We haven't even really talked about this stuff too much before, which is kind of cool.
So if you'd watched any of my podcasts, you would have heard this a minute. I feel like I've said this so many times. It's quite funny.
I'm sorry.
I was thinking people will be like, we've heard this before, Anita, shut up. If anyone's listening.
No, I think I'd heard snippets and things. And I know you mentioned before you had an interesting relationship with food and anxiety. I know that about yourself. I think for me, like, I actually see more similarity through this conversation than the differences that appear on the surface. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't as interested in people as early on as you were. I was more interested in things. So I'd be very interested in sport and very interested in computers. As soon as computers come out, I was like, oh, I joke a little bit about it now, but there's a little bit of Aspie in here, and I'm quite comfortable with that. I love that Aspie.
Type fiving.
Yeah, exactly. So I was probably a little bit more on the thing side than perhaps you. And then, what's kind of interesting is like from a work perspective, we might have completely different industries, completely different roles, but we were both hard at work when we were working in the
Yeah.
corporate space. And so I see that similarity, which I think is really interesting. The difference for me would be when, I came out and started to learn coaching, and initially we didn't go to the same coaching school. I went to a different one, and then we met at, you know, um, my second coaching school, if you like, which has now moved. By the way, not that it's an achievement, but it's now moved to number one on the podium for those that might be watching.
Well, it wasn't number one before. Did you have the first one at number one? I went to your first one first, actually, and swiftly
That's
moved
another
on.
conversation. Yeah. So I think like it's really interesting. I feel like, I had the ability to read people very well, really early on, but that was suppressed for quite a long time. Not actively suppressed, but just not paid attention to. I'd pay more attention to doing the tasks and, achieving stuff than I would, the people side of things. And, towards the end of the corporate career, I was criticized a fair bit. I was always told I was loud and a bit of a naughty boy and a jester, the fool, the clown. And, that was a little bit of a double edged sword for me. I kind of liked it, but I also despised it in a sense. Um, and I think that I didn't really, I got told towards the end of my corporate career quite a bit, what you're doing is super from a, rational, um, kind of delivery perspective, but your emotional intelligence sucks. And that was fair. And then I kind of came out, you can say something if you like, or you don't have to either.
I laughed because I was told the opposite by my type 8 CEO. You've got very high emotional intelligence, Anita. I was like, thank you, I know.
Type 8 here too. Big love to all the type 8s.
We had a great relationship. I always got on well with my 8 CEOs. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Mm.
So I think for me, what happened was when I went into the coaching school, it was, I was in that social phase of what's my purpose, what's meaningful for me these days, because it's no longer really the strive drive anymore. Like what's meaningful now? What's going to replace that sort of plateau or void that I felt? And, it was natural to sort of, when I reflected back on the childhood and the archetypal work, it's like, yeah, it became a service oriented mentality. And then at the same time, I was in a school that was, it was a little bit, there was a lot of trauma work really going on there. For just a blunt way of saying it, there was a lot of people healing themselves rather than learning how to coach. And that's
sure.
okay.
Well, that's what we're there to do. Yeah.
Right. And I needed to do that for myself. So it was a good place for me at the time. It was a good way to learn, that side of life. And so, I was all about purpose and meaning and emotional intelligence. And, I had sort of my hippie phase, let's say, Anita. And, probably had that phase for, let's say, 3 or 4 years. And then, my coaching evolved stylistically through a change of schools as well. Previously I was doing more the traditional coaching, and then found the developmental coaching second. It didn't come first for me. It was
but it should. That's the right order. It's
right.
There was, and I always say with me it was I'd done therapy for years before I'd done other stuff, so I see the relevance of that process for me and for you in the way that you did it, for sure.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. I think it would be bypassing had you just come straight into the developmental thing. It's so necessary to go through the process.
I mean, I don't regret it at all. I spent a lot of money in the process, but that's another
but
story. It is what it is. That comes.
That's any education that you do degree, do whatever. It's like stuff isn't for free, so it's
right. But it was nice, So I had the that transition of, the work environment, I'd filled my cup there. I'd exhausted it. It was empty. It was filled and then it was emptied. And then it was like, what's the next thing? And, so coaching was it. And so, yeah, there's been a
So
couple
what's your
of
answer
phases.
to the question then?
What was the question again?
Trying to get some inspiration for my version of the answer. I'm not really sure.
What was the question again? Just remind me.
You said something. What did you learn about yourself through the process of coaching people?
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I think a couple of things. Other people were showing me dimensions of myself that were completely untapped and unmapped.
Mm-hmm.
And so there'd be situations where, let's say the traditional coaching, or even where I'd fall into mentoring or advising, where I didn't have access to parts of that map.
Mm.
This was the biggest thing that I started to learn through my coaching.
Mm.
And just really getting a deeper, like I said, on the emotional intelligence, I could read people very well, but that would be different to, let's say, genuine empathy or compassion. Like I didn't really have access to that. But then actually doing the people work as a full-time gig rather than having it as just part of another full-time gig, and learning all the sensory acuity and all of that stuff, really gave me for an appreciation that other people see the world radically differently to the way that I do.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's totally okay. Like I might not understand it. And in the past, I would have taken the piss out of them. You know what I mean? But more and more over time, it's like actually their map's their map and it's totally fine. It's my map's not the right map. And how do you help someone where you mightn't have trodden that ground before? So it's not about the content, it's about the context and the map. And so that's probably the biggest thing for me. And really an explosion of self-awareness that wasn't just requiring patterns and shortcuts.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And I think there's that thing of, so given what you've just said, and to answer that question, that is definitely one thing that came is I thought I was really good at reading people. But the beauty of learning how to ask the questions in a more effective way than I would have used to have asked them before was that I realized that I may have been right sometimes, but asking the questions and not just assuming I'm right and giving it to them, but actually listening to them showed me that I didn't always know what I think I knew about reading people. And I think that's one of the really key things, for many people, is societally, we, if we get triggered by something someone said, we'll go, I'm really good at reading people, and that person is not a good person. And it's, that's where we can get caught up. And I think that's where and that was for me definitely, such a big learning to be different from most people on the street that think they're maybe good at reading people, is to go to actually to not know about people, to not be good at reading people, but to be good at asking questions. I think that was a really big standout for me. Huge.
True.
One.
Yeah, true. And I think both of them go hand in hand. Like if we're able to actually have some acuity, let's not call it mind reading for a minute, but if we're able to have some acuity and then follow it up with the curiosity, that's the 1-2 combo.
Yeah.
If
so
we
it's
don't
like
have
just to kind of break that even down is kind of going, so as I see something happening for that person, as I'm watching if we say their body language or their eye movement or they're saying something, to not assume that I know what's going on for them. That's the difference. So to see that there's something, but not labeling it as they're not a very nice person, or they're angry, or they're annoyed with me, blah, blah. And that's the sensory acuity part, is to be able to go, okay, I can see there's something that's changed in their behavior. Now I'm going to ask them, instead of guessing, I'm going to ask them what's going on for them right now in theory. So it's, seeing that. And I think that's the step of the coaching, because a lot of people can see when there's a change in behavior or there's something like that and go, I'm really good at reading people, but it's like, but have you asked them? And that's the difference from
Yeah.
being a person on the street to actually, studying human behavior, I'd say.
And just on that thread of, questions, what comes up for me is, the curiosity, because I guess, what I've learned about myself since actually doing the coaching, full time for half a dozen years is how eternally curious I am. And so when someone shows up, in our group masterminds or in a one-on-one conversation and setting, and things are shared that, aren't really part of my map, it's my natural instinct, let's say, to explore that for myself, even offline after the session. And, just try to get to understand where a person might be coming from if it hasn't been fully elaborated in a session, or even just explore it for myself. And, one of the other shifts in terms of, going into the coaching was the whole aspect of spirituality was not really available here for the first, 36,
Well, it was in the first few years. You just lost it.
Years, yeah. Actually, I'll share something that you definitely don't know. And I'll show you one day, because it still animates my soul to this day. Mum had this book. It was like those coffee table books, like the really big, thick coffee table books. And it was hand-drawn illustration. It was a Nordic book, but it was a hand-drawn book on, what do you call them? God, the name's actually just dwarfs and gnomes and, like, mythical, magical creatures of Nordic origins. Now, here's a funny thing. Like, for some reason, I was totally just drawn to that book. And I mean, it's age appropriate, right? In a certain sense, like the logical, rational mind would say, oh, well, it's age appropriate. It's cartoonish.
Exactly. Yeah.
But no, there was something else about that book that was completely enthralling. And even now, I'm 46 or 47, however old I am, I can't even remember. I still gravitate to that book. And isn't that just a fascination of the mystery of life, and just exploring yourself over and over again? And as we sit here right now, I actually came onto this call after playing, occasionally, I think, I play a little bit of PlayStation. And right now, at the moment, I'm playing a game that's a couple of years old, but it's called God of War Ragnarok. And it's funny because it's based on Norse mythology. And so isn't it interesting how the circle of life is all interconnected?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I on that thread, there's been a lot that I've been watching and hearing recently about this whole evolution of humans to this part where we're going to be superhuman at some point, and really reflecting on these whole childhood experiences that we have. And it's like, we're not going to become superhuman, as in generations to come aren't going to be anything that we're not already. They're just going to be more tapped into what we've forgotten. And so I kind of see it today. I was having this reflection of, so as kids come into the world, instead of conditioning them outside of their dwarves and, that magical stuff, it's more, it's more tapping into that and understanding it for them. And the superhumanness is the potential of us without all of the conditioning of, all of the mind programs, all of the, I won't go too into all of that, but we have been conditioned in a certain way to be able to live on this, to live on this earth as it is at the moment. But there's always changes coming, and we're evolving. So the evolution of us is the potential of a different type of conditioning, that because this one is proving to be very, very outdated. So
yeah, right.
It's not that we were never not spiritual. It's just remembering that, and not.
It's funny.
Not straying too far away. Yeah,
I'm working right now on Andrew AI, so hopefully that doesn't scare too many people. I don't know that I really want to unleash that on the world. There's probably enough of me already, but when I think about it, it's funny because we've got this AI, and so in theory, people are saying it's incredibly smart. I'm not so sure. But that
It's only
aside,
as smart as us, right? Which isn't so sure.
well, largely it's been thought that it's just predicting the next word, and that's a probability estimate, and that's not smart at all.
Mm.
Once you've had so much volume of training data, you'd hopefully get an accurate prediction. But actually, there's a recent paper that shows that there might be some thought processes emerging from the large language models, but that's a whole other conversation. But what I feel about the whole situation there is that I'm working on this Andrew AI, which is essentially a digital replica of me.
I had no doubt it wouldn't be when you said Andrew. Just to say, the self-image part has totally dropped off that he was talking about earlier.
There's no face on it, but it's my voice, it's my tone, it's my quirks, it's my expressions, and underneath it is the language model that supports it. That's not mine. That's obviously someone else's who's ever I'm using as the backbone of it. Sure. But what's interesting to me is that I was thinking about it before, and it's like, even when I'm not there, there's an expression of the voice that would have been associated with me that in a way is like it's deeply spiritual in a sense.
So what do you mean when you're not there? What does that mean?
Well, I don't have to be there. So, for example, Andrew AI is available 24/7 to whoever wants to use it, and so
it's a scary thought.
It doesn't require a Zoom call. What did you say? I missed that.
So that's a scary thought. 24/7. Wow. I'll get a recommendation from the wife. She'll be like, actually, I'm just going to put you on the AI. Just I
know. Yes. So what's interesting about that too is, in the process of working on that, again, you're actually reflecting on yourself and how you go about, tasks and how you are as a being. And so that whole aspect of it's been quite fascinating too, to the point of, how have you evolved since you started coaching? Yeah.
It's just like a different coach, right? Because there's so many of these being created. It's the same thing as someone going to choose your one or someone going to go somewhere else. And it's just picking a different coach, but the AI version rather than
Well, generally people pick coaches, not coaching. That's, not that we're talking about that tonight.
Yeah.
But, sure. And I kind of feel like, your line of thinking, and being, let's say, you had access to the human side of things much earlier than me. And, I think it's really interesting that, if AI is going to be able to do everything that we do today, then the only thing that's really important is meaning and connection in, a world of abundance, really. And so it comes right back to humanity, full circle, even though we're going to be, either masters of or slaves of robots.
Well, as long as we keep creating them, we're only a master of a slave of ourselves, right? The more that we can get, quiet within ourselves and still within ourselves, there's nothing to be a master of, right? It's the meaning that we attribute to it, and we are the ones creating this and feeding into it and using it. So to become a master or slave or whatever is just of us, and that's where we can get a bit lost with this stuff. We are. It is us, same as with everyone in the world. We're all here, making this mess, this beauty together, but we just don't realise it.
Eaten mess.
Yeah.
Fabulous. How have we gone tonight? Have we covered everything that you wanted to cover?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Fab. Good chat.
Hopefully
people have got something out of it. And if
not, we have.
God, we sound like narcissists. Talking about ourselves and what we've got out of our own podcast. I've enjoyed it. That's good. Oh dear, I could go so many places with all that.
All right then. Well, we shall see you all next week. As always, if you've got any questions, please get in touch. Drop a comment, DM us. Always lovely to hear what you think. If there's anything that you would like us to talk about or stop talking about, then yes, we are all ears. Love to hear from you.
Until next time. See you, Anita.